Who would dare make a foe out of the fist of Khonshu, the moon god? Marc Spector, with his various alters, namely Stephen Grant and Jake Lockley, was chosen by the ancient Egyptian god of vengeance and justice to be his champion. As one of the more violent masked vigilantes in the Marvel universe, Marc, or Moon Knight, has gathered quite a few enemies. While some of these are humans, others classify them as nightmare fuel, to put it simply. In this marvelous video, we are going to explore every Moon Knight villain that exists. How have they played a role in making him the superhero we know of today? Let's find out. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Bushman. Raoul Bushman is considered to be Moon Knight's arch-nemesis. In a way, Bushman kicked off the series of events that eventually snowballed into Marc Spector becoming Moon Knight. Raoul Bushman's beginnings were disorderly. Initially, he was part of the Domi tribe from the small African country of Burundi. The colonization of their country displaced him and his family, which resulted in his growing resentment towards the treatment they received. As a youth, his resentment was channeled into a life of violence, which was enabled by Raoul becoming a mercenary for hire. A team of mercenaries, which included Marc Spector and Raoul, were on a mission together in Sudan. In his greed, Raoul killed Dr. Paul Alrane, who had discovered gold in the tomb of Pharaoh Seti II. Raoul responded to Marc's protests by mortally wounding him and leaving him to bleed out in the desert. However, Khonshu discovered Marc and bestowed on him the powers of the Moon Knight. Shadow Knight. This sibling rivalry nearly killed Marc and resulted in the death of Randall Spector, Marc's younger brother. As a youth, Randall secretly resented his brother, even while they worked side by side as mercenaries for the CIA. On one of these missions, Randall switched sides and slaughtered Lisa Maloney, Marc's girlfriend at the time. Lisa told Marc of his brother's betrayal in her dying moments. Marc nearly killed his brother and left him with a broken mind. Randall began his career as a serial killer who hunted nurses. On the Sudan mission, Randall was gunned down by the crazy Raoul, and he stumbled upon Khonshu's will, which claimed that two Khonshus would rise to power and one would kill the other. With the help of CIA agent Sandal Swan and advanced AIM technology, Randall became his brother's villainous counterpart, Shadow Knight. Randall gained superhuman abilities similar to Marc's. Shadow Knight was killed by Moon Knight, who used the Sapphire Crescent. The Wyos. In the comic Moon Knight Volume 5, number 23, the story begins with the Thunderbolts' failure to recruit Moon Knight into their team. Norman Osborn introduced the team member Moonstone to Oliver Finn, who is the head of the organization, the Wyos. Oliver Finn, head of the Wyo, had preceding beef with Moon Knight and bore a scar from one of his crescent darts as proof. The Wyos gang targeted a cafe run by Jean-Paul Deschamps, or Frenchie, as Moon Knight affectionately called him. The gang members gravely injured Frenchie's lover Rob and trashed his beloved restaurant. Frenchie fought back to the best of his abilities till the Wyo gang members ran off to the sound of police sirens. Frenchie wished to exact his revenge on Wyo for hunting his lover, and he visited one of their hangout spots. Moon Knight showed up just in time to help his friend and killed a considerable number of Wyo members. Moonshade. One of the most powerful Moon Knight villains is actually his evil doppelganger. During the Infinity War story arc, Moonshade was created by the evil counterpart of Adam Warlock. Franklin Richards, or Powerhouse's evil counterpart, allied himself with Moonshade, and the pair set off to feed on the life essence of the real Richards. Moon Knight swooped in to disrupt their plan, but the two doppelgangers began absorbing his powers instead. What made Moonshade a formidable foe was his ability to travel from dimension to dimension. He started his journey as he absorbed the life essence and powers of the various Moon Knights across dimensions. Moonshade started with Earth 9209 and faced off with Dark Moon, moving on to Earth 92942, which was home to Moonfang. The last stop was Earth 42992, where the original Moon Knight used his charged bow stick to kill Moonshade. Werewolf by Night. Marc Spector and Jack Russell share the pain of dealing with their unpredictable alter egos. Jack Russell was the unwanting victim of an ancient familial curse. The moon was at its fullest on the night of his 18th birthday. As Jack came of age, the curse of lycanthropy manifested. In fact, Moon Knight's first appearance was in the comic issue Werewolf by Night Volume 1 number 32, published in 1975. While Jack lurked around in dark alleyways in his werewolf form, he was confronted by a masked vigilante who turned out to be Moon Knight. The two faced off, but Jack was at a significant disadvantage since Moon Knight was armed to the teeth with his one major weakness, silver weapons. Moon Knight aimed a silver crescent dart at Jack's chest, which caused him to flee with his tail between his legs. Jack Russell's ailment meant he hardly had the memory of what occurred when he turned into a werewolf by night. Morpheus. Robert Markham suffered a relentless infection and was prescribed an experimental, untested drug by Dr. Paul Alrane. This medicine reacted violently with his DNA and rendered him unable to sleep, and it dramatically altered his appearance. Along with Robert's inability to sleep, he also gained psionic powers. He took up the alias of Morpheus after the Greek god of dreams. Morpheus wished to hunt down Dr. Paul Alrane, whom he held responsible for his condition. Moon Knight was notified of this and confronted Morpheus, who was left wounded. As he was hospitalized, his condition progressed, and he was able to insert nightmares into other people's consciousness. Eventually, Morpheus allied with Bushman and Marc Spector to take out Moon Knight. However, in a surprising turn of events, Morpheus was shot by Marc Spector, and his dying wish was for Moon Knight to avenge his death. Taskmaster. The relationship between Moon Knight and the Taskmaster has been bloody violent since the get-go. Anthony Masters started out as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, who then became a mercenary before settling on being an assassin. Ever since he was a child, Anthony has been blessed with photographic reflexes. This skill proves to be one of the deadliest powers as a Taskmaster. In a fight, Anthony possessed the ability to replicate his opponent's combat style. When Taskmaster was hired to take down Moon Knight, he warned his employers that the fist of Khonshu was on another level entirely. He reminisced about their previous fight where Anthony had been foolish enough to cross Moon Knight. The masked vigilante mercilessly beat the Taskmaster till the skulled villain was begging to be spared. Moon Knight then ripped his skeletal mask off to relish the fear of his enemy's eyes. Midnight Man. Anton Mogart was quite the art connoisseur, but chose to express his passion through acts of stealing precious works of art. He would rob museums and art galleries precisely at midnight, which earned him the name Midnight Man. While he attempted to steal a Monet painting from the Ramadan Art Gallery, Anton was interrupted by Moon Knight. In their tussle, Midnight Man fell into the river and was thought to be dead, hence forgotten. However, the sewers of New Jersey and New York proved to be highly toxic and left him with terrible deformities. He also found out that his stolen possessions, so dear to him, were claimed by the authorities. Midnight Man teamed up with Bushman, and the two lured him into a backed-up sewage chamber, but the vigilante escaped. Anton found out that he had cancer, and so, in his last bid, he fought Moon Knight and died doing so. Midnight. Jeffrey Wilde was the son of Anton Mogart, also known as Midnight Man. As his father's successor, Jeff took up the alias of Midnight and set out to avenge his father's death, but he was still young and impressionable. Once confronted by his father's old foe, Jeff thought about allying with him instead. He donned a suit similar to Moon Knight's and began working with him. Jeff's reckless nature got him in trouble with the Secret Empire. The champion of Khonshu tried to help Midnight, but he was shot and assumed to be dead, when in fact the Secret Empire took his wounded body and transformed him into a cyborg. Jeff was being controlled by the Empire, which then combined with his rekindled resentment towards Moon Knight. After a while, a serial killer was reported using his victim's blood to paint a clock pointing to midnight. Moon Knight was shocked to realize that it was Midnight who attacked him in his own home. Midnight didn't kill the masked vigilante, claiming that he wanted the full Moon Knight experience. Their final fight ended with Moon Knight impaling Midnight through the head with a clock hand. This familial rivalry goes way back. Bullseye. Lester had a troubled childhood, and as an adult, recounted the story of setting fire to his home in an attempt to kill his own father. Lester, who relished killing, became a mercenary for hire. Though he considered Daredevil to be his arch-nemesis, Bullseye and Moon Knight have had a few encounters. During the Avengers Civil War, Bullseye was made part of the Thunderbolts team under Norman Osborn. In the comic titled Moon Knight Volume 5, number 25, Bullseye is attacked by the suppression fire aimed at Moon Knight's helicopter, the Moonchopper. The marksman followed the masked vigilante underwater and into his headquarters, where Bullseye pulled weapons from Moon Knight's armory and began looking for him. Bullseye accidentally set off a massive bomb, and many believed that the pair died in the explosion that followed. Marc Spector is said to be dead, but it's just the alter that ceased to exist after this encounter. His second alter, Jack Lockley, continued to function as Moon Knight. Stained Glass Scarlet. Scarlet Fasanera was abused her entire life. She wished to take her fate into her own hands and started off by killing her father. Scarlet's abusive husband was killed in an accident as he fell down the stairs in a church. Scarlet's good-for-nothing son, Joseph Mad Dog Fasanera, had followed in his father's footsteps and rampaged around the city. Moon Knight noticed Scarlet at the church in which she lived as a nun. She also had a mysterious telepathic connection to Moon Knight. Mad Dog Joe showed up at his mother's church and fired a few rounds at Moon Knight. Scarlet was forced into action and shot her own son to death. She picked up the alias of Stained Glass Scarlet. Sadly, she died in the same church as her husband and son, but Stained Glass Scarlet gained notoriety after her death. A cult formed in her name which transformed her spirit into a non-corporal divine force. One could ritualistically summon her to kill. Arthur Harrow. Arthur Harrow is perhaps the most conventionally popular Moon Knight villain since he is portrayed as the main antagonist of the 2022 TV miniseries Moon Knight. Dr. Arthur Harrow was lined up for Medical Nobel Prize for his pain theories. However, suspicions were raised by Dr. Victor Grail about his methods and experiments, which helped him hypothesize his theories. As Marc Spector was driving, visions from the priests of Khonshu hinted that something was off. He turned into the Moon Knight and noticed Dr. Grail's kidnapping. Meanwhile, Harrow continued to carry out his inhumane and brutal experiments in controlling his victims' nerves and neurons. He was revealed to be involved in the horror that occurred in Auschwitz as well. The crazed doctor then told his mind-controlled subjects to kill Mark and Grail. Moon Knight regretted hurting the helpless victims, but he hardly had a choice. Harrow managed to escape and continue his experiments in Paraguay. Count Nefaria. Luchino Nefaria was an ultra-rich individual who craved more power and influence. He wished to join the Magi organization, which was a criminal syndicate involving 3 of the most influential families in New York. Luchino realized his abilities to control beings who are ionically powered. He proceeded to use Atlas and Wonder Man as his minions. Over time, the cunning Count Nefaria came to be known as the Kingpin of Los Angeles. His plans halted when Moon Knight moved to LA as well. Nefaria ordered Mr. Hyde to transport one of the Ultron's bodies, but Moon Knight antagonizingly stole the body's head. An ally of the Moon Knight lured Nefaria out by waving around a fake Ultron head filled with a substance made to weaken the Kingpin of LA. Later on, Nefaria managed to kill Echo, which triggered Moon Knight significantly. One of his alters believed he was Wolverine, and in his berserker rage, nearly killed Count Nefaria. The Zodiac. Perhaps the most innovative group of villains to exist. As their name implies, the Zodiacs are based on the astrological zodiac signs with their respective powers, created by a wealthy criminal and business mogul named Cornelius Van Lunt. He went on to become a Taurus and a member of the group. The Zodiac believed in the dominance of the world's economic and political system. Each member of the group was given the alias of the zodiac sign under which they were born. While none of the members possessed naturally predisposed superhuman powers, they were given abilities via advanced technology. Moon Knight fought with the second iteration of the group, and the members were deadly androids who were given the same powers as their human counterparts. Moon Knight allied himself with the Defenders and confronted the members, mainly Libra, who could become incorporeal, and Virgo, who could drain the energy of his foes. Sun King. The man who went on to become Sun King had a troubled childhood as he was abused by his own father. He realized his powers of pyromancy and used them to sacrifice his father. As a youth, the man went on to live on the streets and eventually landed in juvenile prison. He later joined the army where he used his powers on 2 soldiers who relentlessly bullied him and burned them to a crisp. He was admitted to the Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane, where Marc Spector's former doctor diagnosed the man with bipolar disorder and was codenamed Patient 86. Patient 86 found Egyptian mythology and identified himself with the god of the sun, Amun-Ra. He wished to hunt Moon Knight since he was the champion of Amun-Ra's foe, Khonshu. The Sun King even had powers akin to those of Amun-Ra. He lured Moonlight to Island Ra and wore him down mentally, making the masked vigilante question his entire existence. The Sun King nearly defeated the Moon Knight, but the fist of Khonshu gained strength inspired by his daughter, Diatrice. Mephisto. Mephisto is a demon who is eons old. The lingering spirits of the elder gods made the first Hell Lords exist. Mephisto rules over a dimension, which he refers to as Hell or Hades. The Lord of Hell proved to be one of the most dangerous enemies of the Moon Knight, since his capabilities are far greater. Mephisto has the power to create various alternate realities and tap into the powers of netherworld dimensions. The comic Avengers number 34 followed the story of Moon Knight and Khonshu as they stumble upon Hotel Inferno in Las Vegas. They found Mephisto orchestrating his plans from inside his prison cell. Moon Knight took matters into his own hands and aimed a blow at Mephisto's chest with Mjolnir, aka Thor's hammer. This left Mephisto with a gaping hole in his chest, but Khonshu reminded Moon Knight that Mephisto can't be truly defeated, just as evil can never be completely wiped out. Killer Schreike. As soon as Simon Maddox came of age, he enlisted himself in the US military. He was hired by a mega conglomerate to work on covert missions. Simon was sent to the mutagenics lab owned by Branch Corporation, where he underwent extensive genetic and physical training to enhance his strength, endurance, and durability. A mini anti-gravity generator was surgically inserted into the lower spine, and he was given a special suit with advanced weaponry. Made into a weapon, the codename Killer Schreike was slapped on him and he was sent off on missions. At the time of the superhuman civil war, Killer Schreike was captured by Frenchie and brought to the Thunderbolts. Under the Superhuman Registration Act, Schreike joined the Thunderbolts. After the end of the war, Schreike escaped to live in the slums of New York City. His freedom irked Moon Knight, who sought him out and violently beat him to a bloody pulp. Crossfire. William Cross was one of the best extractors of information the CIA had seen. He was skilled at brainwashing and utilizing ultrasonics to his benefit. However, William began to stray from his work for the CIA and eventually faked his own death to become a freelance mercenary. He involved himself in risky missions that involved drug cartels and assassinations. On one of these missions, he was caught in an explosion that blew off his left eye and ear. He replaced his damaged eye with a ceramic one, which also functioned as an infrared imaging device. Hence, Crossfire was created. His aim was to get rid of all costumed superheroes who dared to oppose him. Ironically, this very plan was disrupted by the Moon Knight and the Thing, but Crossfire managed to escape their gruesome clutches and continue his conspiracy. One of his plans consisted of killing Hawkeye and ambushing all the heroes who would undoubtedly attend his funeral. Chainsaw. Chainsaw made his debut as an enemy of Moon Knight in the issue Marc Spector Moon Knight Volume 1, number 23. Chainsaw is head of the Praetorians, a deranged motorcycle gang of white supremacists. They were hired by the Secret Empire to kill the Punisher, but they failed to do so. The comic followed the story of Marc Spector meeting the mercenary Bo Olsen, an old and dear friend. Marc gained access to S.H.I.E.L.D. files, which revealed that Bo Olsen had been working for the Praetorians, who operated from their gladiator-style dungeon called the Hate Factory. Marc enlisted the help of Frenchie and Marlene, but they were captured by Chainsaw, who intended to kill them. Chainsaw's favorite way of killing his victims was to ride towards them on his motorcycle at high speed with a chainsaw pointing right at their hearts. In another story arc, Chainsaw and his gang were presumably killed by Daredevil. The Committee. The Committee were villains of the economy. Though they believed that they were actually saving the global economy, their methods usually showed themselves to be unethical and legally questionable. The secret organization was comprised of the wealthiest businessmen and the socialites of Los Angeles. They employed Sarnak and his Legion of Fear to instill terror in the people of LA. Their plans were often disrupted by the Werewolf by Night and mainly the Moon Knight. Originally, Moon Knight worked for the Committee, but he realized their morals lay corrupt and left. Khonshu noticed that Marc's desire to be his fist of vengeance was faltering, so he ordered the Committee to reinvigorate his champion. Going against orders, the Committee hired Bushman to disfigure Moon Knight, but not kill him. After a series of psychologically torturous assaults, they finally hired Taskmaster to kill Moon Knight, but the villain failed his task. Xenos. The sergeant of the police, Gwen, was a white supremacist who believed that foreigners must be held responsible for the ruin of America. His views were radically right-leaning, and he resorted to violent methods to carry out his vision. Gwen's weird quirk was that he kept rats dressed up in dolls' clothes, living in a model town in his basement, and called the rats his army. For his first assassination, Gwen disguised himself as the Moon Knight and shot the Japanese trade minister at JFK Airport. The people truly believed it to be Moon Moon Knight, but he managed to clear up these claims and began hunting down Gwen. This time, Gwen put on a rat costume and knighted himself as Xenos, referring to his xenophobic beliefs. Moon Knight tracked him down to his basement, where Xenos freed the rats that attacked the masked vigilante. Xenos accidentally stepped on a mousetrap and Moon Knight finally cornered him. Madame Masque. Giulietta Nefaria was the daughter of Count Nefaria. He gave up his daughter to a wealthy businessman and she was raised as Whitney Frost. She inherited her biological father's possession as Magi's leader. Her ill intentions lay in her wish to steal advanced technologies from Stark Industries. She managed to carry out a heist, but the plane she was on crashed, which left her horribly disfigured. She covered up her scarred face with a golden mask and took the alias of Madame Masque. However, Hood used the reality gem from the Infinity Gauntlet to restore her face the way it was. Madame Masque grew to be a prominent criminal in the underworld, which attracted the attention of the Moon Knight. Madame Masque picked up her father's work after he had been killed and attempted to avenge his death by taking on Moon Knight. In their tussle, she hit her head on a fire hydrant and was presumed to be dead. Black Spector. Carson Knowles returned home from his military service as a jaded man. He felt his job was thankless, and his wife left him and took their son with her. Brewing with resentment and a deep hatred for the world that stripped everything away from him, Carson decided to run for mayor. He also created the alias of Black Spector, a violent criminal who terrorized and blackmailed the electoral precinct to boost his chances of becoming mayor. Moon Knight confronted Black Spector, and as they fought, Carson's mask slipped, revealing his identity. Moon Knight uncovered his identity to the public, and Marlene exposed him in the political arena. Later, when Carson got out of prison, his violent tendencies seemed to increase tenfold as he began carving a crescent shape on the foreheads of the innocents that he had killed. During this time, Moon Knight had lost his ability to walk, but he still managed to kill Black Spector by making him fall to his death from a rooftop. Bora. Anzela Fedorova had dreamt of becoming a ballerina until her mutations manifested and she grew 7 feet tall. She also gained the ability to summon Arctic winds on whim by creating openings in the space-time continuum. Prior to this, Moon Knight had started using a wheelchair since one of his missions went horribly wrong. While he attended a dance event, he witnessed Bora confront the leader of the dance group, and she killed him out of bitter resentment. Marc felt helpless with his inability to walk, yet he felt the powers granted by Khonshu coursing through his veins. Moon Knight took Professor X's counsel as he revealed that Bora's powers are psionic. He advised Moon Knight to enlist the help of the X-Men to deal with Bora. Later, at a ballet performance, Bora summoned her powers to attack the dancers, but Moon Knight swooped in to save them just in time. With the help of Frenchie, Marlene, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and his regained confidence, the masked vigilante defeated the troublesome mutant. Demogoblin. Jason Macendale went from being the Jack-o'-lantern to the Hobgoblin and finally settled on being the Demogoblin. During the Inferno story arc, Hobgoblin is clearly thirsty for more power. This prompted him to make a deal with a demon lord of Limbo named Nastor. Nastor gave Jason a demon to add to his own strength. However, this demon began overpowering Jason completely. The Hobgoblin faced off with Doctor Strange, who magically separated the two entities, and thus the Demogoblin was created. Demogoblin's intent was to obliterate all the sinners who exist in the world. As righteous as that sounds, his methods gave him a twisted reputation of a demon who kills for sport. When Moon Knight confronted this nightmarish demon, the Demogoblin possessed him, and the masked vigilante had to be exorcised by Doctor Strange and Mr. Fantastic. Arsenal. Nimrod Strange was previously part of several terrorist groups, such as the Red Army, Black September, and the Black Hand. Nimrod was somewhat of a megalomaniac, and he prepared himself by devising a suit with technologically advanced weaponry. He took up commanding the Third World Slayers, which operated from a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. One of his terrorist missions, Nimrod killed Moon Knight's dear friend, Benjamin Abramov. The Fist of Khonshu instantly set out for revenge and easily tore through his finest fighters. As Moon Knight approached Arsenal, the terrorist fled on a massive oil barge. He planned to spill large amounts of oil in the waters surrounding New York and set off barges strapped with explosives to cause catastrophic damage. Moon Knight climbed on board and defused all the bombs except the barge Arsenal was on. The suicide bomber set off his own barge without realizing that his plan had been in vain. Jester. Jonathan Powers was a mortal who wished nothing else but to make a successful career as an actor on Broadway. He chose to act in an odd Broadway show, Cyrano de Bergerac, and was mercilessly mocked by the critics. This marked the end of his career, but he continued to obsess over the different ways that would make him a versatile actor. He went to fencing, gymnastics, and bodybuilding lessons to enhance his skill set. He focused on everything else but acting lessons. Still, he was ridiculed by audiences, which led him to don a mask and pick up the alias of the impish Jester. He contacted the tinkerer who created several gimmicky-looking toys that were actually concealed weapons. For instance, there are plastic flying discs that shoot out an anesthetic drug and rubber balls that are explosives in disguise. Jester mainly functioned as a petty criminal and was thrown into prison on multiple occasions by Moon Knight. The profile. The sons and daughters of the original committee fashioned the organization and wished for revenge. The committee 2.0 hired the profile, a man who has the psionic ability to read people and deduce valuable information about them. He can study the past of the person he's profiling and determine their actions in the future with fair accuracy. However, the profile's advice wasn't executed properly by the committee, and Moon Knight ended up destroying their headquarters. Moon Knight then cornered the profile and forced him to reveal Midnight's entire profile that he had stored in his mind. With Marc as Moon Knight in New York, the profile was hired by the Hood to read Marc's new alter name Jack Lockley, but the informant found this task tough. The profile's story ended with him kneeling in front of Khonshu's idol in Egypt. His fate remains unknown. Agony. Agony is a member of the Hellbent. The Hellbent's members are from the Elder race and the early men from prehistory. The medieval Knights of Templar made an oath to the Egyptian god of wisdom and magic Thoth to protect the Hellbent. Some of the knights grew power-hungry and began scheming against one another. One of these Knights of Templar was Seth the Immortal. He betrayed his own kin and hired Agony as an assassin. Agony, with the help of Basilisk, ambushed the inner circle of the Scottish Knights Templar. Agony mercilessly slaughtered all the members, but Seth ended up betraying her despite her loyalty. At this point in time, Moon Knight has been possessed by a demon, as the evidence points to his deteriorating body. Agony is canonically considered to be a Moon Knight villain, since she makes an appearance as an antagonist in the comic Marc Spector Moon Knight Volume 1, number 44. Ammit. Ammitu, or Amut, is the ancient Egyptian goddess who is also known as the Devourer of the Dead. She serves as the goddess of Order Ma'at. She partook in the judgment of the scales whenever a human died. The god of the afterlife, Anubis, would weigh the mortal soul along the feather of Ma'at. Those who were unconditionally kind and righteous in life meant their souls weighed lighter than a feather. These gods' souls were sent to the afterlife, or even Aru, the field of reeds, which was paradise. Those who sinned had their souls devoured by Ammit. In the TV show, Ammit was trapped by Khonshu but freed by Ara Harrow. She was infamous for judging souls before they sinned. After she was freed, Ammit confronted the Moon Knight, Khonshu, and the Scarlet Scarab. She was trapped in Harrow's body, who was killed by Marc's alter, Jack Lockley. Anarchy. Anarchy was an agent working for the underground, liberated, totally integrated mobile army to unite mankind, or Ultimatum for short. This organization stood for anarchy and abolished the ideology of nationalism. They were terrorists who directed their fire towards government institutions. An ultimatum robbery of weapons and ammunitions was planned by Flag Smasher, another anti-nationalist terrorist with anarchy working by his side. The heist was interrupted by the vigilantes, Moon Knight and the Punisher. In an extremely impressive feat, the anarchists took on both the heroes and defeated them. However, the pair got back to her eventually. In a true heroic sense, Moon Knight made sure Punisher didn't kill her while she was knocked out. Bell and Bast. Going into a little more detail about how the Hellbent was created, the process involved the remains of the Elder races, which were the humanoid races that ruled this planet before the existence of humanity. These remains were combined with prehistoric humans, which resulted in the conception of the Hellbent. The Hellbent were treated as outcasts by both humans and superhuman beings. The Hellbent were protected by the Knights of Templar. As time went by, the Hellbent became more corrupt and split into subgroups, the likes of the Hellbent Prime and Hellbent Omega. The Hellbent Prime were the offspring of powerful demons, while the Hellbent Omega could disguise themselves as humans. The Knights of Templar were also half Hellbent and half human. Bell and Bass are two Hellbents who have opposing abilities. Bell can create high-frequency energy, while Bass can let off low-frequency energy. When Moon Knight battled the Hellbent and their leader, he discovered a new superpower. He was able to drain the life force of the Hellbent simply through touch. This makes for a dangerous skill if used smartly. Seth Falcon. Did you know that an entire comic storyline exists that portrays Marc as a descendant of the Hellbent? Seth Falcon was a Knight of Templar who turned to the dark side. He thirsted for more power and influence and turned to Hellbent Prime. He ordered the Hellbent Prime to take numerous wives and sire a whole line of powerful descendants. A few of these Hellbents left their hellholes and produced offspring with mortal humans. This bloodline supposedly includes Marc Spector, aka Moon Knight, his brother Randall, and Marc's friend Frenchie. Seth Falcon instilled a deep-rooted and racist belief among these Hellbent descendants to discriminate against lower Hellbent. On the other hand, he vowed to liberate the lesser Hellbent from their racist higher kin. In this genius manipulative game, Seth gathered a loyal following that was willing to sacrifice themselves for his cause. Seth's real intent was to gain the knowledge Thoth had offered but refused to. Similar to Moon Knight's newly found ability, Seth can drain the life force from everyone he touches until they are left as nothing but a skeleton. Cjun Creed. Manhattan saw an increase in the drug crisis, specifically cocaine. On his nightly runs, Moon Knight broke up a drug trade that was attacked by one of the surprisingly strong dealers named Creed. Cjun Creed's drug operation was held up by an infiltrator named Isabel Christelle. Christelle turned out to be Marc's old friend and Frenchie's former lover. She visited them at their house and asked Frenchie to keep a package for her safely. A few days later, they found out that Isabel had been sadly killed. Upon opening the package, their eyes rested on $250,000. Upon investigation, Moon Knight realized that Isabel had been killed by Cjun Creed. The minute he realized that she had infiltrated his drug cartel and sent the shipment of cocaine somewhere else entirely, Moon Knight and Frenchie tracked down Cjun to this drug warehouse, where Frenchie beat him to death for killing his beloved. Commodore Planet. Not much is known about Donald Planet's early life, except for the fact that he underwent a mysterious experiment that granted him superhuman strength and endurance. Commodore Planet was hired by a crime boss to annihilate 3 cabs, which had evidence that could be held against him. However, his plans are stopped by the Moon Knight. The masked vigilante also wanted to uncover Commodore Planet's criminal organization and finally cornered one of his associates. In their tussle, the Commodore's associate fell and broke his neck, while Moon Knight was trapped in the blistering heat during a heat wave. Meanwhile, the Commodore tried selling arms and ammunition to another militant group. Moon Knight, in an attempt to uncover the money stashed by Commodore, nearly drowns but is saved by Iron Fist and Power Man. In their fight against Commodore, he pulled out his weapon of choice, a bazooka, but the pair managed to defeat him and finally handed him over to the authorities. Lupin the Wolf. Lupin the Wolf was born with a condition known as hypotrichosis, which caused abnormal amounts of hair to grow all over his body. This prompted him to join the circus, which succeeded in making him relatively wealthy. He lived in his world, which was his mansion, and he began conspiring against those who were part of the outside world. He funded a terrorist organization that planned to use Manhattan as a hostage and threatened the authorities with nuclear weapons for a large ransom. But Moon Knight disrupted these plans, which made Lupin the Wolf want to confront the hero. Lupin had plans of his own. He wanted to detonate the bombs regardless of the puny ransom, and he wished to duel Moon Knight. He challenged the Fist of Khonshu to a fight. Lupin foolishly believed that Moon Knight wouldn't kill him. However, when he overheard Frenchie's claim that he had disarmed the nuclear bombs, Lupin impaled himself on Moon Knight's sword. He preferred to die than serve a life sentence in jail. Dead Zone Snapdragon Zapa Brothers. The Zapa Brothers are deadly mercenaries that crossed Moon Knight. The pair of Zapa Brothers were mercenaries for hire as well as professional lucha libre wrestlers, also known as luchadores. Their skill set included Mexican wrestling moves in hand-to-hand combat combined with lethal firearms. Even in real battles, the two brothers would tag team each other and alternate in fighting. Carmen Alcantara's father placed a bounty on her head, which the wrestling duo trio wished to collect. They used a rocket launcher to bust open the door where Moon Knight was and demanded to know where Carmen was. As the search went on, the Zapa Brothers realized that this wasn't what they signed up for. They decided to give up on trying to kill Moon Knight and Carmen. As the masked vigilante fought Carmen's father, the pair of brothers stole his drug money and split it with Moon Knight. The surprisingly wholesome enemies to allies trope, if we've ever seen one. Truth. Nothing is known about Truth's early years or where he came from. One day, he just showed up and began attacking the New York subways after his superhuman abilities were triggered. The savior of the night confronted the criminal and seemingly killed him on the spot. In reality, Truth survived but was arrested. He allied up with Bushman and the Sun King, and the trio lured the champion of Khonshu to the Isle of Ra, where the Sun King faced a humiliating defeat. This led Truth to question their motives, and he went on to break away from the group. Truth spent contemplative time alone to figure out the purpose of his existence. While Moon Knight suggested Sun King admit himself to an asylum to heal his instability, Truth decided to do the same. Then Truth was broken out of prison and brainwashed by a Nazi named Ernst. A brainwashed Truth nearly unleashed his powers on the world when Moon Knight stepped in and snapped him out of it. Truth possesses the ability of the Truth Touch, which makes people witness the truth of life upon touch, but prolonged contact would make their eyes bleed. Mr. Hyde. Dr. Kelvin Zabos's favorite book was the classic Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. He wished to unleash the side of him that would be akin to Mr. Hyde. He put his vision into action and began stealing money from various places he worked. Eventually, Zabo created the Hyde formula, which transformed him into a super strong being like Hulk, whom he knighted as Mr. Hyde. Moon Knight covertly witnessed a deal go down between two armed men and Mr. Hyde by the docks. Mr. Hyde demanded the two men pay up, and when they refused to oblige, he simply killed them. Moon Knight decided to investigate further and confronted Mr. Hyde, upon which he realized that the Dangered Doctor was selling a deceased Ultron. The Moon Knight defeated Hyde and severed Ultron's head before quickly concealing himself again. The boss of the two armed men appeared and took off with the rest of Ultron's body without paying Hyde a dime. Marvelous verdict. Here we come to the end of a long list of every Moon Knight villain to exist. We can see as the years went by, the Fist Khonshu began resorting to more violent methods of dealing with these crooks. When one is made the champion of an ancient god, he is bound to have quite a few people trying to put him out of commission forever. Moon Knight is a character who has been explored in the MCU. There are various villains on this list who hold so much potential to be explored even more in depth. For instance, don't you think the family feud between Mark and Randall would be a great storyline to explore in the future of the MCU? And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave and like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thank you, everyone.